tonight, care in crisis. The hospice with no cuts left to make. With only a fraction of the funding it needs coming from the NHS, a South London facility says it's close to breaking point.
We can't wait much longer for the government to take action, otherwise we won't be able to care for those people that are in our community that are facing the end of life.
Also ahead, the failings at Barnet Hospital that led to a 20-year-old woman dying from undiagnosed meningitis. As the row over sexism in the restaurant industry simmers, professionals say it is still a problem. Plus,
Pulse on 3, 1, 2, 3, pulse!
Nothing but nets for London Pulse as they gear up for the Netball Super League and
no politics, no drinking, no swearing.
The golden rules that have kept the iconic cabmen shelters happy for 150 years. Good evening. A hospice in South London says vital end-of-life care is at risk of being lost because of a severe lack of funding across the sector. St Raphael's in Cheam says demand for hospice services is going up, but its shrinking budget limits what it can do for people. The result, patients left dying without dignity. The service costs millions of pounds a year to run, with just a fraction coming from the NHS. The hospice says there are no more reasonable cuts it can make to keep going. Our senior correspondent Ron K. Phillips reports.
Going home today?
Yes, I'm going home.
It's because of the expert palliative care Joan James has received that she's able to return to her own home. For 2 weeks, specialist nurses and care workers have paid as much attention to her symptoms as they have to her emotional well-being and comfort.
You can't believe the care that these nurses do for you and your families. Give people in their final days of life and their families the support and let them pass with dignity.
Serving the boroughs of Merton and Sutton, St Raphael's relies heavily for its funding on its 11 charity shops, fundraising and donations. Just 27% of the £6.5 million it needs every year comes from the NHS. The hospice already cares for around 1,000 patients a year, and with people living longer, they just can't keep up. St Raphael's CEO thought the government was throwing a lifeline when it announced £100 million funding for hospices, but her relief was short-lived.
The £100 million grant is very gratefully received, and I think it's important that we say that. But actually that's ring-fenced for capital projects and digital projects. But we're asking for 50% of our funding. I don't think that's unreasonable. And if we get 50% of our funding, we will save the NHS an awful lot more money.
The impact of the lack of funding on the outreach work provided by St Raphael's has been devastating. Services have already been cut by a third, leaving fewer of these nurses and paramedics with specialist end-of-life care training to work in the community.
We did have a hospice at home team which supports the team that I'm in, but unfortunately we had to lose that because we didn't have enough funding. It's certainly having a detrimental effect in the community. A lot of district nurses are phoning us and GPs because they are struggling as well.
According to the local MP, the government could solve their funding problem with one simple change.
Healthcare providers need to be exempt from the national insurance rise because it impacts them today or the beginning of the next financial year, and it means that they will have to cut staff. They won't be able to provide the services, they won't be able to help as many people, and we'll have more people passing away in conditions that we shouldn't be seeing today.
Grateful for the specialist care she received, Joan is now determined to fundraise and do her bit to keep this hospice running.
Ronke, what are the chances that this hospice could get any extra funding from the NHS?
Well, I'll tell you what the NHS in South West London says. It says it's doing all it can to support local hospices. But of course, there are financial pressures on all NHS services. But those working in palliative care say their sector does seem to be at the end of the queue when it comes to funding. And interestingly, the largest charity outside of the NHS, which focuses on end-of-life care, predicts that by 2048, 700,000 people a year will need palliative care. And they say something needs to be done, and it needs to be done now.
And we need to have a strategy in place which enables better community provision of palliative care for the future, which is supported by a sustainable funding approach to make sure that care and support can be properly funded and properly sustained for the long term.
And of course, the government would say that they are supporting hospices with this £100 million that they recently announced and the extra funding they're giving to young adults. But as you heard in my report, everyone involved in this sector says that just isn't enough.
OK, Ronke, thank you. Next tonight, an inquest has found that multiple failings at Barnet Hospital contributed to the death of a 20-year-old woman who was sent home with undiagnosed meningitis. Sophie Ward's family have said key opportunities were missed to save her. Helen Keenan sent this report from Barnet Coroner's Court.
Here at Barnet Coroner's Court, the inquest jury reached a narrative conclusion and found that the decision to discharge Sophie, not to administer antibiotics, and the record keeping at the hospital all more than minimally contributed to her death. Now, the strain of meningitis she had was not part of routine vaccinations. It was only introduced into them in 2015. Now, she was misdiagnosed. She died of meningitis septicemia less than 24 hours later. Now, today, her family gathered outside the court to call for changes at the hospital. They sat down with me after to talk about how wonderful Sophie was and how those that were supposed to be treating her had failed her.
Sophie was a wonderful person. And she was just the loveliest, kindest, gentlest, courageous, fearless person there was. We turned up at reception. We had to queue. I was very busy, very chaotic. At each point, so in reception, I had said, I am worried it is meningitis. We said the same to triage, I'm worried it is meningitis. We went into the doctor and I said, I am worried it is meningitis. I think she was treated in a very sloppy, unprofessional manner. Didn't look at the patient in front of them, had almost a foregone conclusion that this was not meningitis.
For someone who was so amazing to only be dead because of the fault of someone with no knowledge of sepsis and an organisation that is disordered and doesn't work makes a death even sadder than something that would have just happened anyway.
They've expressed condolences in an unreserved way, but to me, those words, they ring hollow when they're not followed by an honest recognition of the mistakes they made.
In a statement, the hospital told us they apologised to Sophie's family and shared their deepest condolences. They went on to say in their statement, "We will take the findings extremely seriously and will carefully review the evidence. Steps have been taken to improve sepsis and meningitis awareness. We also continue to remind emergency department staff that senior doctors are available for advice and emphasise the importance of listening to the concerns of patients and families." Words that the family hope will lead to change, as they don't want any other person to go through what they have.
Helen Keenan reporting there from Barnet. To other news now, and a woman has been found guilty of murdering her two young sons at their home in Dagenham. Cara Alexander was convicted of killing her sons, 2-year-old Elijah and 5-year-old Marley, in December 2022. Alexander had claimed that both boys drowned in the bath while she was sleeping. She will be sentenced in April. And 6 of the homes that were evacuated this week when a huge sinkhole opened on a Surrey high street are safe enough to return to, a councillor has said. 30 properties were evacuated when the road caved in on Godstone High Street on Monday. Women working in the culinary world have united to highlight inequality in the sector after a top male chef claimed he'd never witnessed sexism in kitchens. Hundreds of female chefs have signed an open letter in response to Jason Atherton's comments to make sure the discrimination faced by women is not ignored. Carolyn Sims sat down with some of the chefs involved to hear more about what's being cited as the industry's Me Too moment. I'm sorry, I think we've got a problem with the sound there on Carolyn Sims' report. I will try and get it for you in just a moment. Still to come on the programme, I will be speaking to the actor portraying the Hollywood legend Sidney Poitier on the West End stage, and a retreat from the roads. We take a peek inside a cabmen's shelter 150 years after they first appeared on London's streets. But first, will Arteta's side narrow the gap at the top of the Premier League to close in on Liverpool's lead? Let's have a look at the sport now.
Zero Accounting Software sponsors ITV Regional Sports Report.
Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta says West Ham will be tough competition at the Emirates this weekend. The Gunners are sitting in second place, 8 points away from current table toppers Liverpool. Arteta says there's still a lot to play for, but tomorrow's results will also decide how they tackle their Champions League fixture against PSV Eindhoven.
Well, we have to do our job, and it's going to be a tough one tomorrow against West Ham, and if we do that, obviously we will be looking at that game on Sunday. But it's 13 games to go still a lot to play, and you can see how difficult it is for everybody to win football matches. So.
And it's a big weekend overall for London's Premier League clubs. Brentford take on Leicester City away this evening. And tomorrow, there's 2 London derbies. As we've heard, Arsenal face West Ham United and Fulham play Crystal Palace at home. Meanwhile, Spurs are away at Ipswich Town and Chelsea go to Villa Park. And they've got tantalisingly close before, but could this be the year London's netballers get their hands on one of the sport's ultimate trophies? The Netball Super League is the game's elite-level competition, with the final being played at the O2. Not far away at the Copper Box, London Pulse have their eyes on the prize and a chance to bolster the game's legacy. Anton Allen went to meet them.
1, 2, 3, Pulse! Ready to compete in the new-look Netball Super League. The spotlight is on the London Pulse's stars. They play a key role in getting more fans to watch netball and boost its commercial value and career opportunities.
It's really important that girls know that this is a legitimate career option for them.
The Netball Super League has moved from 10 to 8 teams. 2 London clubs, the London Mavericks and the London Pulse, were selected to compete. This season, players have an extra motivation. Their average salary will increase by at least 60%, with the minimum salary payment more than doubling.
It's going to make such a huge difference for everyone involved. It means that we can put more into training, more into each other off court and things like that. And hopefully everyone's even more motivated to really put everything into this season.
The push to attract more fans includes having 50% of games played at major venues across the country. London Pulse will play their home matches here at the Copper Box Arena. The NSL's goal is a 10-year journey to full professionalism. The hope is young girls like these on their summer camp will be able to grow up one day and choose netball as a full-time career.
You know, if you're 10 years old right now, you can dream to be a professional sportswoman and have a salary that's really, really strong.
At 6'3", Olivia is a perfect shooter, but her athleticism meant she could have excelled at many sports. As a teenager, she ended up picking up netball at her school in Bromley. Olivia's gone on to represent England at the World Cup. She says netball has helped her see the world.
There's just so much more out there. I never was like the person to like travel or like go abroad. Netball has allowed me to do that, so just the fact that I'm able to do that has absolutely changed my life, so yeah.
The new season begins on the 14th of March. A little too soon for these young stars to join their role models, but they'll be cheering them on from the growing crowds. Antoine Allen, ITV News.
Next, Sidney Poitier was a Hollywood trailblazer who overcame seemingly insurmountable odds to pave the way for black representation in the film industry. He was the first black actor to win an Oscar in a leading role for his portrayal of a handyman in the 1964 film Lilies of the Field. Now his story of breaking barriers in Hollywood is back on stage at the London Apollo. In Retrograde, Ivano Jeremiah, who's reprising his role as Sydney, joins me now. Welcome, Ivano.
Good evening, Duncan.
What an amazing role, not just because of who he was as a man, but also because he paved the way in film for so many black actors.
Yeah, I mean, what a career. I mean, sort of studying him, it's just someone who's served, well, was active from sort of President Hoover right through to President Biden.
Yeah.
You know, 50 years in Hollywood. So it's a great honour to be putting on the big shoes of such a great man.
Tell me about the plot of the play, because it takes place, doesn't it, during quite a crunch meeting for Poitier as he's on the deal of getting a big Hollywood contract. What happens?
Yeah, so if you imagine a corner office of NBC Studios, 1955, him and Robert Allen Arthur, the writer of Edge of the City, a film that featured Cassavetes later on, walk into this office to sign some legal papers for the film that's shooting the next week. It turns out that this contract is asking much more than either of them had originally anticipated.
OK, good tease. Let's have a quick look at you in rehearsals as Sidney Poitier.
I was 15 and I had to earn a living. My education was poor. I quit school at 12 and a half.
How about we skip to the fun part, Sidney?
Right. I was looking through the Amsterdam...
What did you do to get into his voice, into his character?
I was lucky enough to have a massive catalogue of film and writings from him to sort of get into the mood of it. And I think sort of since then, sort of exploring the play again for the second time and transferring to the West End, Shaftesbury Avenue, was giving me so much more time to sort of get into it and, you know, rekindle that relationship with Sidney.
Yeah. It was at a time when he was sort of battling whether to sort of bite his tongue, make people feel comfortable and safe. Do you get to speak your mind now at your stage as an actor, or do you sometimes sort of hold back?
I think, I mean, this play's relevance just keeps on accumulating. It was also, 1955 was quite a tender time politically, where quite a lot of people are forced to make these decisions about sort of their morals and how far they're willing to go for their careers. Morals, are they willing to shop in friends? And this was also, might I add, sort of the height of McCarthyism, so it's quite a tense time.
Maybe it's because those themes are somewhat relevant today that it's done so well, sold out at the Kiln, didn't it? And now it's brilliant for an original piece to be getting a transfer to the West End.
Yes, I mean, Ryan Callie-Cameron, an excellent writer who's now spent 3 years on our West End, and also produced by Nika Burns, head of NIMAX, and Coleman Domingo has come on board as one of our producers as well. So, you know, it's fantastic to have a bigger space to facilitate for so many more people after being sold out of the Kiln.
Well, enjoy your second run. Ivano, wonderful to talk to you.
Lovely to meet you, Duncan.
Thank you
for having us.
Returning now to Carolyn Sims' reports about the fight for women who say they want to be treated equally in the restaurant industry. Here it is.
Yeah, that's why you're here. You've worked in kitchens before, yeah?
Yes.
Yes, what?
Yes, chef.
Yes, chef.
Think professional kitchen, and a scene like this probably comes to mind.
There's 4 kitchens still left.
But now female chefs are speaking out, saying this shouldn't be the reality. Anna Tobias, who runs a restaurant in Bloomsbury, is among 70 chefs who signed an open letter this week condemning the inequality and sexism many of them have faced.
I've been burned, I've been bullied, I've been called every name. I could tell you these stories. You know, like when I was a head pastry chef in a 1-star, they didn't know what to do with me, so they thought, let's have a really serious meeting and sit her down and tell her, this is as far as you can go.
Part of the problem with hospitality is often you're working in a small business. So if you do have an issue, who is it that you can actually go to speak to? It's incredibly difficult to come forward.
When I had a business partner that most of the time people would speak to him, refer to him, I would often be told, oh, you're being too sensitive.
The letter was written in response to comments made by celebrity chef Jason Atherton, who told the Times newspaper he hadn't seen any sexism in the kitchen. He's since said on Instagram that he doesn't condone sexism in the industry or anywhere.
Seeing that article just felt offensive, to think that there's a man in a very senior position who then turns around and essentially claims that the experiences of a lot of women aren't real.
The group also highlighted that at the prestigious Michelin Guide UK ceremony just over a week ago, only 1 out of 22 new stars were awarded to a female chef. After the announcement came this.
To all the women of the industry, I also want to say you are doing a brilliant job.
Julia Erdl is an ambassador for the Burnt Chef project, set up to support mental health in the profession.
What we're really looking for is an environment where everyone of all genders is accepted, is welcome, and that everybody is able to work together collectively to progress the industry.
The letters encouraging other chefs to share their experiences in what is still a male-dominated industry. In London, 65% of chefs are men.
We've got a lot of invisible women working hard, creating delicious food, training brilliant chefs. And, you know, we've got the opportunity now to kind of open the doors and show, you know, London, you know, the women that are cooking behind the stoves.
Carolyn Sim, ITV News, Bloomsbury.
Finally this evening, they have been a fixture in the city for more than a century, with rows of black cabs lining up outside. This year marks 150 years of the cabmen shelters, the green huts that give solace to cabbies and coffees to everyone else. Here's Rags Martel.
A constant in a changing city. Historic huts that give comfort to cabbies.
So these are the cabmen shelters, better known as the iconic Green Hut taxi shelters, of which there are 13 left around London, 11 of which are still in service and fully operational.
They're like little green TARDISes dotted around London, and despite their name, they're actually open to all, not just cabbies.
Thanks, Luba. Well, anyone can use the cab shelters. To go inside, you've got to be a licensed cab driver. But just for today, we've been given special permission. The shelters are now celebrating 150 years in London, but they now have to fight for their existence.
And we want to keep them, preserve them, utilise them, and put them back into the taxi profession's mind, but also the general public's mind. Because quite often a lot of them don't know that they can be served at the window.
What's it like being the keeper of the cabman shelter?
It's changing. I've done this for quite a long time in a different shelter, and the last 3 years I've been in this shelter. It's a very changing environment, and it used to be very busy, where now definitely the atmosphere is changing, but it's rewarding.
The first cabman shelter appeared in 1875. There used to be as many as 61 of them, and all are no larger than a horse and cart and have their own set of rules.
The shelters today still maintain they've got the same rules. No politics, no drinking, no swearing. You've got cab drivers in the shelter. I've completely ignored all those requests.
What I'm amazed by is the value, because a tea, £1.50 is ridiculous. That's like, you can't get that anymore.
Yeah, we're trying our best. That's what everybody associates London with, history. So if we give up on our history, why would people come and see London?
Let's keep using them, because they are part of English history and British history and London's history, as is the cab trade.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Great to see inside them. Let's have a look at the weather now. Here's Nick Miller.
An icy start to the day will give way to a series of oohs and ahs. TUI sponsors ITV London weekend weather.
Hello, very mild today, despite the clouds before the rain moved in, 16 degrees. We have ended the day, though, with some outbreaks of rain. Initially, not much to it, but there'll be some heavier rain arriving from the south as the night goes on, courtesy of this weather front clearing tomorrow, but leaving a lot of cloud at least for the morning. But a ridge of high pressure, so largely fine Saturday. And then on Sunday, it will be turning much windier, some rain coming in, but it may take much of the day before it gets here. So Sunday, certainly not a washout. Here's how your weekend is shaping up. Brightening up tomorrow after a cloudy start, and then on Sunday, yes, much windier, but the rain very slow to arrive. We are seeing some patches of rain around this evening, but the longer you stay out, the more likely you are to get properly wet as it turns heavier and more persistent, clearing eastwards into tomorrow morning. And a mild start again, 8 to 10 degrees with a lighter breeze. If you are seeing some rain, the further east you're watching, last an hour or two into the morning, then clearing. But there is a hangback of cloud tomorrow. Could be well on into the afternoon before we see some of those sunny spells developing with a chance of the odd shower. A touch cooler in a westerly breeze around 11 to 13 degrees. Let's take a look at Sunday. For much of the morning, it's looking dry, some hazy brightness around. You'll notice the wind picking up, but it could be quite a few hours into the afternoon before we see some outbreaks of rain coming in on the current timing. It is much windier, some gusts in excess of 40 miles an hour, gusts in the Black Arrows, and a touch cooler again on Sunday. And temperatures do cool off closer to the average for the time of year as we see out the month, with next week sunshine and showers. Have a great weekend.
TUI sponsors ITV London Weekend Weather.
And that is it from us. The evening news is next with Lucrezia. But from all of us on the London team, thank you for watching and have a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.